This program is presented by the Fromm Institute for Lifelong Learning at the University of San Francisco. The Fromm Institute, keeping up with the times no matter when.
We've been talking about Muhammad in these past sessions, and today we're going to start somewhere else. Ancient Athens, about 1,000 years earlier. Why? To demonstrate a point. Athens had a number of very important religious festivals which were dedicated to the goddess Athena. And so, who took part in these festivals? Everybody. Everybody who lived in Athens, whether they were citizens or just residents, everyone took part in these festivals. It didn't make any difference whether you wanted to worship Athena or not. It didn't make any difference whether you believed in Athena or not. As a resident of Athens, you were expected to participate in the religious festivals. It was your duty. You see, in all human cultures across the world and across time, and not just in classical Greece, religion is not a personal choice. Religion is a civic duty, a civic matter. You participate because you are a resident of the city. You honor the gods that the city honors. In other words, we call this a civic religion. Religion is not a personal choice. The religion of the ruler, in this case the city, is the religion of the people. Again, this is true of all human cultures across time and across the world. Religion is not a personal choice. The king, the government, determines the religion for the people. Now, technically, in Muhammad's lifetime and in his teachings, religion, that is, submission to the one true God, is a personal choice. And yet, which brings us back to Abraham. We go back to Abraham, and you recall that I mentioned that Abraham left his second wife, Hagar, and their 14-year-old son, Ishmael, in the desert region where Mecca developed. He brought them to this desert region either because, in some of the stories, Sarah, Abraham's older and primary wife, was jealous. She was jealous of Hagar and wanted to make sure that her son, that is Sarah's son, Isaac, would become the heir of his father. But in other stories, Abraham brought Hagar and Ishmael to this desert region because God, that is Allah, had commanded him to do so. As a matter of fact, when Abraham and Hagar and Ishmael arrived in this desert region where Mecca would develop, Allah, that is God, said to Abraham, "You have to sacrifice Ishmael." Now, the first response of Abraham obviously was, "Absolutely not." But then he realized it was the devil who was trying to prevent him from doing so, and so Abraham threw rocks at this appearance of the devil, and he agreed to sacrifice his son. But then Hagar intervened, "Absolutely not." Once again, Abraham realized it was the devil trying to prevent them from doing God's will, and so again he threw rocks at the phantom of the devil. And finally, Ishmael himself was very unwilling to be sacrificed, but once again, Abraham realized this is the devil trying to prevent it, and threw rocks once again. And then Hagar and Ishmael, as well as Abraham, acquiesced to the will of God, the will of Allah. But before Abraham could sacrifice Ishmael, God granted a reprieve, and he said, "Don't sacrifice your son. Sacrifice this ram instead." And so Abraham, with great thanksgiving and great joy, sacrificed this animal instead of Ishmael. After this, being in this desert region, they came to the area where the great altar had once stood. Ruins of it were still there, the Kaaba. Ishmael and his father Abraham rebuilt this Kaaba. And then Abraham told Hagar and Ishmael that God had told him they must remain here. And Abraham left. And Hagar panicked. Hagar panicked because her son soon was faint with thirst and with hunger. And indeed, in her panic, eventually Hagar ran to the hills, back and forth, trying to find water. Again, she ran back and forth 7 times between the hills of Safa and Marwa, 2 low-lying hills from which she thought she would be able to see water. And then her son faints. Now, a brief moment in art history, because you will notice that in this particular picture, as in virtually every picture that depicts Hagar and Ishmael, he's a great deal younger than 14. This is, I guess, artistic license, but at any rate, technically, he's 14 years old. Technically, he is, in the Arabic world, an adult. And so when Hagar holds her dying son in her arms, an angel of God appears before her. He points to a rock. From the rock bursts out water. And as the water flows, Hagar drinks from it, and she and her son are rescued. And this gush of water has continued to this day. It is called the Well of Zamzam. It is this well which makes the city of Mecca possible because it has a constant source of water. Now, these famous events were remembered across the centuries, and their remembrance was part of the pilgrimage ritual in the city of Mecca that continued for 2,000 years before Muhammad. The pilgrimage ritual, which included throwing rocks at the devil, running 7 times back and forth between these 2 hills, Safa and Marwa, just as Hagar had done, and coming to the well of Zamzam, just as Hagar and her son Ishmael had done, which saved them both, and which, according to Arabic traditions, still rescues the faithful today. These pilgrimage rites were also accepted by Muhammad and became part of his pilgrimage to Mecca. Rites which are still carried out today by millions of people who come to Mecca in the pilgrimage month every year, millions of them. And again, they replicate the running back and forth between the 2 hills, the casting of the stones, and the drinking from the well of Zamzam. Now, as I mentioned last week, today we're going to take a pilgrimage to Mecca, and you won't need your passports. You won't actually even need any of the special authorizations that are required to get to Mecca, which we will loyally fill out and which will be rejected anyway, because in order to go to Mecca, you actually have to be a Muslim. And most of us, I assume, are not Muslims. But before we do go, let's take a look at the essentials of the religion of Islam as it emerged out of the teachings of Muhammad in the early 600s AD. Again, just as a review, and again, just to sort of bring this back into our consciousness for today, Islam considers itself to be the primal religion, that is, the first and authentic religion. Islam believes that it is the religion of Adam, of Abraham, and of human nature. Islam, again, is often described by historians as being the youngest of the major religions, and Muslims categorically deny this. Again, according to them, every person is born a Muslim. That is, every person is born in submission to God, and then either out of personal choices or the environment and culture in which one lives leads one to go astray, to become a Christian or a Jew or a non-believer. But, according to Muslims, to be human means to be Muslim. That is, To be human means to be in submission to God. Second, Islam considers itself to be the universal religion. Again, in this religion, Muslims come from almost every conceivable racial, ethnic, and cultural background. Muslims see themselves as restoring the unity of all God's people. Islam, for example, again, these teachings of Muhammad, or actually these teachings of God through Muhammad, overcome the limitations of Christianity, the limitations of Judaism. For example, as one Muslim scholar wrote, Islam proclaims a practical synthesis of Judaism and Christianity for all humanity, overcoming the incompleteness of the justice of Judaism and the idealistic love of Christianity. Islam brings fulfillment to all that Judaism and Christianity promised. For the Muslim believers, Islam is perfected Judaism and perfected Christianity. Again, Islam reconciles all humanity to God. And thirdly, Islam considers itself to be the final religion. Final religion meaning that Islam is God's last revelation, a fulfillment of all that has gone before. Moses was given the law. David was given the Psalms. Jesus was given the gospel. Judaism offers God's message of justice. Christianity proclaims the love of God. But to Muhammad were given the direct words of God. In other words, the Quran, the revelations, are considered to be the direct words of God. And therefore Muhammad is often called the seal of the prophets, meaning that once these revelations were completed, the book is closed and sealed. No more divine revelations are necessary. All has been revealed. So again, Islam considers itself to be the primal religion, the universal religion, the final religion. So let's turn to the principles of Islam. First, Islam means submission. At least this is how it is often translated into English, into European languages. You can tell the word Islam, or the name Islam, actually is related to shalom or salam. Again, the ancient Semitic word for peace. So what this means is that you are making your peace with God. In other words, you are submitting to God's will. You are making peace with God. And therefore, a Muslim means one who submits, one who submits to Allah, to God. Similarly, the revelations which Muhammad received, again, which becomes the Quran, are the embodiment, again, of the teachings of God that were revealed to Muhammad. And finally, there is also the hadith. Again, these terms are on your timeline. The hadith, which are the traditions, a collection of sayings of Muhammad, observations of Muhammad, while he was in Medina, again, when he led the city of Medina and led the community of the faithful. Next, we have what are known as the Articles of Faith. The Muslim faithful must believe in one true God, of course. The only God, the one true God, which is Allah. They must believe in the angels, including, of course, the archangel Gabriel, the angel of the messages. They must believe in the prophets, which include Noah, Abraham, Moses, Isaiah, Jesus, and Muhammad, the seal of the prophets. The sacred books, that is the Torah, or the Old Testament, the Christian New Testament, and the Quran. They must believe in God's redemptive plan for all of humanity and a bodily resurrection on the last day, the day of judgment. Next, there are what are known as the 5 pillars of Islam. Again, the 5 pillars of Islam. These are the religious duties of all Muslims. The first of these is the profession of faith. Islam is a convert religion, and it's actually very easy to convert to Islam. All you do is you say in the presence of a faithful Muslim, the following: "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet." It's wonderfully alliterative in the Arabic. La ilaha illa Allah, Muhammad Rasul Allah. Again, it implies all these articles of faith which I have just mentioned to you previously. The second of these pillars is the obligation of the 5 daily prayers. At dawn, midday, mid-afternoon, sunset, and nightfall. Again, these prayers, which include verses, of course, from the Quran, are said 5 times a day, but they are also said publicly on Friday evenings, said publicly in the mosques. Third of these pillars is giving alms to the poor. Obviously, in Muhammad's time, this was, in Muhammad's time, this was giving merchandise or giving food, giving actual things. Today, of course, like in the Christian or the Jewish world, it also involves giving money. The fourth pillar is, certainly to us, obviously very famous, the ritual fasting during the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is the 9th month of the Muslim calendar. The Muslim calendar is a lunar calendar, a calendar, again, oriented with the moon, very, very typical for desert cultures. Our calendar, as you know, of course, is a solar calendar. That is a calendar organized according to the sun. Since these 2 years, the lunar year and the solar year, are actually different, the lunar year, the moon year being shorter, what this means is that the month Ramadan actually rotates over the course of many generations, rotates through our solar calendar. In other words, Ramadan does not correspond to any specific month that we have in our solar calendar. Again, this ritual fasting during Ramadan, again, it's the 9th month, and this month is specific because this is the month in which Muhammad initially received his first revelations through the angel Gabriel. And so from dawn until dusk, you take no food and you take no water. It's actually a very severe fast. No food, no water, especially in desert regions. Again, many of us cannot actually even imagine what this would be like. It's, of course, to strengthen self-discipline and also to remember the plight of the poor. But after the setting of the sun, there is great feasting. So during the night, again, there is great feasting. The mosques are bright with lights. In other words, you eat at night and you fast during the day. The fifth of these pillars is the pilgrimage to Mecca. It is the obligation of every Muslim man and woman to take at least one pilgrimage to Mecca in their lifetime, which of course is what we are all going to do today. Again, this was expected of every able-bodied man and woman. And finally, this of course also, by the way, again, just to clarify this is on the one hand, again, to bring Arabia back into the minds of the believers, because again, Arabia has this very, very sacred quality in the world of the Muslims. It's also, of course, to emphasize the brotherhood or the relationship, the community, again, of all Muslims, and to underscore piety and faithfulness as well. And then we have the 6th pillar of the 5 pillars of Islam, the jihad, the holy war. It sometimes is actually called the 6th pillar. Now, the jihad is not controversial in its essence. All Muslims believe in this, but what they believe varies. In other words, for some, the jihad is the holy war within yourself, to fight against all those things which take us away from God, which take us away from Allah, which take us away from the one true path. But from the very beginning, there is also the injunction to spread the faith by the sword if necessary. In other words, to enlarge the realm of true belief. This too, again, is expected of every able-bodied man. Again, the jihad to spread the faith by one form or by another. So let us now go on this Hajj. Let us go on a pilgrimage to Mecca. Here we have a map. It's a modern map. Again, I know that some of you cannot see this very well, but you will see here at the great center, this is Saudi Arabia. To the left along the coast of the Again, the Red Sea right here. You will see Mecca. You'll notice that it is inland. Again, it's inland from the coast. And this is where we're going to go. Now, Mecca across the centuries, here, for example, in the 1600s, and you will see in the center, again, this great cube that is known as the Kaaba. Again, here, this very large cube, and then the sacred precinct around it. The large cube, again, which is the center of the Muslim faith, the Kaaba. It is called the house of God. It is believed, again, you remember this from the previous stories I've told you in previous sessions, it's believed to be directly below the house of God in heaven. It is also believed to be an ancient altar which Adam had built. And again, in Meccan traditions, it is also believed that Adam himself is buried deep beneath this great building. Now, when Muslims came to this area, they came from different tribes, often with different animosities, family animosities. And so once you came to the precinct, that is basically a 20-mile zone around Mecca, you were in a sanctuary. Again, Mecca means sanctuary, but this means it's a place of no violence. It's a combat-free zone, so to speak. In other words, no violence is allowed in this entire precinct, again, 20 miles around the city of Mecca. This, of course, allowed Mecca to thrive not only as a pilgrimage site, but it also allows Mecca to thrive as a merchant and commercial center. Because here, no matter who came, you're not allowed to fight. So once again, Mecca here in the 1600s, Mecca in the 1700s, Mecca getting larger, and Mecca in the 1800s. You will notice, and in this particular picture, that there's a large accumulation of people here in the front of the city, outside the gates of the city, but you can see that the line stretches all the way out to the horizon. Again, the 1800s, and a photograph from approximately 1900. Again, the Kaaba at the center of the sacred precinct, and this is what the Great Mosque looks like today. Now, if you travel, for example, from Jeddah on the coast, the Red Sea coast, to Mecca, you pass underneath this terrific archway. This archway, I believe, was built around 1979. Again, it mimics a Quran holder. You will see that it arches across the freeway, across this road, and at the very top you will see is what looks like the Quran opened to a sacred text. This marks the beginning of the sacred precinct. And once again, it's a checkpoint so that only Muslims with authorization are allowed beyond this. Any of us who are not Muslim cannot proceed any further. Pilgrims can come here at any time of the year, but the Hajj month, that is the month of pilgrimage, is the world's largest religious gathering. Anywhere from 2 million to 3 million people converge on the city of Mecca. It is quite a stunning sight. And so the process is as follows. For those of you who are familiar with pilgrimages, and again, pilgrimages occur in all religions, whether we're talking about the Japanese religion, the Christian religions, ancient religions, pagan religions, Hindu religions, all have the concept of pilgrimage. The idea of cleansing yourself, removing yourself from the world, and reconnecting with true and powerful spirituality, which fundamentally transforms your life. And so part of this ritual, of course, is always, and here in Islam too, a cleansing. A ritual washing in which you take off your clothes. Of course, it's particularly for men. This is just the way it is. I'm sorry. Again, it's particularly for men that you remove all ornamentations, your eye watches, for example. You remove all your ornamentation, your earrings, your necklaces, for example. Anything that would indicate status. The basic idea is that all men face God with their soul laid bare without any of the world's distinctions. And then they put on this ihram, as you see. It's 2 pieces of seamless white cloth worn over the naked body. It symbolizes man's original condition. This ihram, again, while a Muslim is wearing this ihram, you are forbidden to hunt, to kill, to argue, to have sex, to engage in deceit or in any form of violence. And once the pilgrimage is over, this ihram is washed in the water of the well of Zamzam. And then this ihram is taken home and it is used at your funeral as your shroud. Here again, youngsters with an ihram. And next, the pilgrims gather for the sunset prayers, that is the Maghrib prayers, the sunset prayers at the great mosque. Here you can see these magnificent minarets, again, these towers, from which the callers call out for prayer. These minarets are about 300 feet high. Now, in this great mosque, again, this enormous mosque of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, it can accommodate 2 million people. Again, it's a staggering amount if you think about this. Again, these colonnades on various levels. Each colonnade, for example, can accommodate 500,000 worshippers. And at the center of this is, again, the Kaaba, again, this sacred shrine with its black cloth. You will notice that the first ritual is 7 circumambulations, that is, circling the Kaaba 7 times in a counterclockwise direction. Again, this is very, very typical for many religions, and it is the case here in Islam as well. You will notice, again, this swirling, again, the circumambulation, again, this to mirror what the angels do as they circle around the house of God. This great Kaaba, as you can see, is covered by a large black cloth that is embroidered. It's called a kiswa. And again, this is actually a very ancient Semitic tradition as well. Apparently, in the most ancient of times, Semitic tribes would cover a temple or a sacred place with black cloth. This particular black cloth is made of black silk. A new one is made every year. It is then placed over the Kaaba in the Hajj, that is, in the pilgrimage month. And the old one is then cut up and donated away to individuals or to organizations. As you can see a little bit here in this picture, that it is embroidered, again with, of course, quotations from the Quran, as well as in gold embroidery of the Quran as well. These pilgrims, as you can see, are assembled in front of the door into the Kaaba, which again is a sacred room. There are very few pilgrims that are actually allowed to pray at the door, and there are even less pilgrims who are allowed inside. Again, this is a very, very special privilege. Once a year, just before the Hajj month, before the pilgrimage month begins, the governor of the city of Mecca opens the door and perfumes it, again, as a way of making it special and of making it sacred. Here is a small sketch of the interior of the Kaaba, and here a photograph of the Kaaba in its interior. Again, it is actually relatively simple, relatively austere, but again, it is very, very sacred. On this sketch right here, you will see the Hajar Aswad. This again is the black stone, which I mentioned to you on the first day of class. Again, this stone which fell as a star from heaven in front of a very startled Abraham and Ishmael, which prompted them at this place where the stone landed to rebuild the altar that Adam had built so many, many millennia earlier. And this stone is embedded in the bottom of the Kaaba, and here you see this again very, very famous black rock. Here we have again a view of the Kaaba with again a large assembly of pilgrims. It's a long distance shot, as you can see with the minaret. But this is not the way it looks today. Over the course of the last 15 years, Saudi Arabia has done a number of major improvements or alterations to accommodate the increasing number of pilgrims which come here on a yearly basis. So, for example, they have built a set of causeways. You'll notice in this particular picture there's an upper causeway, as well as a lower one, so to allow for more people to circumambulate around the Kaaba. And now it actually occurs, as you can see, on several different levels. Again, these walkways around the Kaaba. On this sketch of the Great Mosque, you also see two other, again, you'll see some indications here. This, again, is the Kaaba, and then there are a number of other features. For example, the Hirsch Ismail. It's the balcony-looking feature here to the right. This is believed by Muslims to be part of the original Kaaba, which again long, long ago had been destroyed before Abraham and Ishmael built this Kaaba. It is also believed that in this enclosure is where Hagar and Ishmael are actually buried. It is also, again, believed that further down is where Adam himself, again, the first human, Adam is buried as well. Again, this is the Hirsch Ishmael. And then also gathered around the Kaaba is what is called right here the Maqam Ibrahim. Again, the Maqam Ibrahim, which is again very close to the Kaaba as well. This is that particular shrine because it is believed that Abraham, in his particular powerful spirituality, had stood on a rock next to the Kaaba, next to this altar, and his form had burned footsteps into this rock. And so this shrine protects those footsteps. Here again, these are considered to be the footsteps of Abraham encased in glass and in a shrine. Now, the next major step in the form of this pilgrimage is what is known as the running. Again, pilgrims recapture this running of Hagar 7 times back and forth between the two hills. You can see that now, again, this is the great mosque in Mecca, and you will see here the two hills. There's Safa and there's Marwa. And you will notice that this running is now actually indoors. In other words, there's a very, very large hallway, essentially, that was constructed in order to allow pilgrims by ever larger numbers to do this indoors away from the sun and for their protection 7 times. The length of this is about 5 football fields. It's about 500 yards. Again, it's an enormous length. And pilgrims, once again, are asked to walk quickly back and forth 7 times to recreate again this panicked running back and forth of Hagar between these two hills. Now, this is what the mosque looked like in the 1970s, 1980s, early 1990s. And here again, you see this very, very long building, which is where the running takes place. And this is what the mosque looks like today. The running area is much more difficult to see. The mosque has been expanded enormously, as you can see, but it's this section of the mosque right here to the right, again next to this green area. This is where the running takes place. So again, it's about 5 football fields long, and again, by the thousands, pilgrims run back and forth, again, symbolically recreating this running back and forth of Hagar, again in search for water. Again, the very long hallway. And then you can refresh yourself at, naturally, the well of Zamzam. The pilgrimage continues with a series of steps. You see it outlined here in a very fuzzy fashion, and the Hajj guide as follows. Again, here is Mecca. Mecca, again, is one of the ways of transliterating the name. Again, this is where the pilgrims begin. Then pilgrims go on foot to an area known as Mina. Here in Mina, they stop, they pray, they read from the Quran. They prepare themselves spiritually for the most important part of the pilgrimage, which is moving to the Mount of Arafat. Again, as you recall from last week, the Mount of Arafat is where Muhammad gives his last great sermon, the sermon in which he proclaims that all Muslims are brothers. And so the pilgrims, again, 1.5 to 2 million of them, then move from Mina, where they camp, to Mount Arafat. This is a distance of about 12 miles. Again, just to give you an idea of the scope. Again, it's a distance of about 12 miles. Here is Mount Arafat. Here, Mount Arafat, again, they read from the time period of noon to sunset. They read from the Quran. They follow certain important rituals. And then they return halfway to Mina, to Muzdalifah. And here, Muzdalifah, they pick up 49 stones. They wait until late night, and then they gradually move over here to Mina once again, to this area where there are pillars that represent the devil and the forces of evil. And you take these 49 stones and you throw them at the pillars to show your rejection of the devil, to show your rejection of evil. Again, this too reconstructs, this symbolizes Abraham's rejection of the devil when God told him to sacrifice his son Ishmael. Again, this rejection of the devil. Then a return, once this has been completed, a return to Mina, again to the encampments. At this point, there is once more a cleansing. Then there is prayers, there is feasting, again, great feasting. Each pilgrim slaughters or has slaughtered an animal, which again recreates the slaughtering of the ram after Ishmael is released from God's command to be sacrificed. This joyous occasion, again, takes about 4 days, again, the ritual slaughter and the eating, these festivities. And then at the very conclusion, the pilgrims return to the great mosque at Mecca for one more 7 circumambulations of the Kaaba and the conclusions of the pilgrimage. So here's some pictures. Again, pilgrims streaming towards Mina. Pilgrims streaming towards Mina. Again, you see in the background, again, this enormous encampment. This encampment, again, it houses about 2 million people. It's generally organized by country. And you can see that they are air-conditioned. Again, it's an enormous city. You will also see in the background there are luxury hotels for those people who don't want to camp in the tents. Again, it's an enormous encampment, one of the world's largest religious gathering here in Mina. Then from Mina, again, the pilgrims proceed out at the very beginning of dawn. Men generally, again, wear the ihram. Women are asked just to wear what is decent and proper in their own particular culture, which again accounts for a great variation of costumes. Nigerian women here, for example, women from Indonesia, women from West Africa, but they all converge ultimately onto Mount Arafat. And here at Mount Arafat, they stand, again, this is called the standing. They stand on the mountain or around it from noon until sunset. Again, it's usually about 6 hours, in which they then pray and follow a recitation of certain important passages. This particular part of the pilgrimage is the center. It's essentially an asking for forgiveness. It's essentially a cleansing of the soul, the rejuvenation, the spiritual rejuvenation of the faithful. If any part of this particular part of the pilgrimage is not performed properly, the entire pilgrimage is invalid and will have to be done again. Here, Mount Arafat, and again, as you can imagine, in the tremendous heat of this Arabian desert, there are sort of, I like to call these like the Walt Disney sprinklers are on. Again, they provide for cooling for, again, these hundreds of thousands, ultimately millions of people. Then, as you remember, they travel from Mount Arafat halfway to Muzdalifah, and it's a large plain where they assemble again 49 rocks. Here again on this plain, 49 rocks which will then be thrown at the columns of the devil, which then begins in the following day. Once again, traveling the rest of the way back to Mina, where again these great columns are located. This is what they originally looked like. Again, in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 3 columns which represent the devil and the forces of evil, and men and women would throw 49 stones again at each of these 3 different columns to show that they are rejecting, and to show that they are rejecting the forces of evil. This has always been the most dangerous part of the pilgrimage. Again, because people crush towards the front to try to throw their stones. Oftentimes people pass out. Again, it's a very, very dangerous part. And inevitably, because people are throwing stones at the pillars, they miss. And they throw stones which land in other people's faces. In other words, they're throwing stones across this opening, and injuries result. Again, there are several levels of this. Again, it's very, very dangerous. And so ultimately in, I believe, 2007, if I'm not mistaken, 2009, Saudi Arabia decided to reorganize this. This is, again, this area of the columns. They're called the Jamarat. Again, these Jamarat columns. And here again, pilgrims streaming into this building. What Saudi Arabia decided to do is to completely change the configuration of these columns. You can see that they are enormous. You'll see that they're on several levels, but they also have enclosures. In other words, that the rocks once thrown, well, they are assembled, but they don't actually hit other pilgrims. And then here in the lower level, again, you see these columns now are very, very wide, which means it's easier to hit and it's harder to hit other people. But again, it's one of the very important parts of this pilgrimage site. Again, as in all pilgrimages, a rejection of evil. Again, these three great Jamarat on multiple levels, a rejection of the devil. Again, mimicking Abraham's rejection of the devil as well. All right. We were talking about this again last week. The recent staggering death toll here in this again in Mina last 2 weeks ago, again in September. Again, tremendous casualties as a number of groups of pilgrims, again these great streams of pilgrims, met and collided and then literally trampled. Apparently now over 2,200 people have been killed in this. Again, it's just absolutely horrendous. Again, there were a large number of people coming from the Jamarat pillars, and another group of people met. Again, they sort of collided, and then again, just tremendous chaos. Again, about 2,200 people have been killed. It's the worst crush, the worst trampling in Mecca's history, but it's not the first time this has happened. Again, just this tremendous crush of these people as they get sluiced through these various passageways. Finally, after the casting of the stones, here again, the Jamarat, then the men cleanse themselves once again. Men usually cut off all of their hair. Women generally cut off a lock of their hair. Again, this is the final sort of ritual cleansing once again. Here we have Muslims from Central Asia, Muslims from Western China, and Muslims from Pakistan, for example. Again, yes, he cut off his hair and he's bleeding to show it. That's very tragic, right? And then they have to provide washing facilities for 2 million people, again, showering facilities. Cold water, cold drinks are usually provided by charitable and philanthropic. Yes, those kinds of organizations. Then there is, of course, the sacrifice of the animals. And again, it varies, of course, depending upon how affluent you are. Here we have, for example, a group of people who are, eating during this feast. And here we have camels once again. And this actually, personally, I just find really, really heartrending. Because camels, you have to kind of love camels. I mean, they're amazing animals. They're absolutely amazing animals. But today, they're raised primarily as food. In other words, they are Arabian beef, essentially. Even young camels here are being taken. Again, they've been raised by a Bedouin family. And they're brought to be slaughtered for dinner. And there is a baby camel being consumed right here. And finally, again, once more, we have a return to the city of Mecca, and once again, a 7 circumambulation of the Kaaba, and then the pilgrimage over, and it's time to shop. Yes. Again, you recall, Mecca has always been a great commercial center. It has always made tremendous amounts of money from the pilgrimages, and it makes even more, of course, economic windfalls now from these pilgrimages. Here we have a house with, again, these much more older sort of lattice alcoves, which, of course, allow for some cool air into the buildings. And, of course, very, very popular is gold. Actually, very popular are rosaries. Muslims do have rosaries. 99 beads corresponding to the 99 beautiful names of God. You can also visit Mount Hira. This is the mountain which soars above Mecca, and this is where Muhammad had his first revelations. Again, where Muhammad encountered the angel Gabriel, and you can actually take the path up through the crevice, to the place where Muhammad, again in this particular cave, had these first revelations, these first encounters with the angel Gabriel. Again, Mount Hira, again, there are several other famous sites in this area as well. So once more, just sort of as a conclusion, here we have the Great Mosque in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and then a major reorganization, a vast expansion of the mosque. You can see that, for example, this entire area right here has been added. Two much larger, much more powerful minarets have been added as well. Again, a vast expansion of the mosque. But that's actually not what it looks like, because this is what Mecca looks like today. You can see below, again, a further expansion of the mosque, and then these increasing numbers of luxury hotels, and this enormous building which is known as the Abraj al-Bayit, with its enormous clock face. This vast building dwarfs the Great Mosque. It's the world's largest concrete building, 120 stories high, the clock tower. In other words, 2,000 feet, this tower to the very top. And it has many of the world's, it has the highest hotel in the world, run by the Fairmont Group. The tallest clock tower in the world, the largest clock faces, 4 of them, the large clock faces in the world. Each one is 5 times bigger than Big Ben in London. The largest building floor area in the world, 1.5 million square meters. Residential towers with 2 helipads, so you can literally fly home. Again, helipads. The highest condominiums are just below the clocks, up in here. The clock tower has 3,000 rooms. It has suites, which can accommodate 100,000 people. The tower can be seen 8 miles away. It calls out through amplifiers to prayer, which can be heard 4 miles away. And you can see with this clock tower, of course, is that Muslim scholars today argue that Muslims should no longer follow Greenwich Mean Time centered in London, but they should follow Meccan time instead. Again, this tower is 2,000 feet tall. There's a new building in Shanghai, of course, which is now taller, and the Burj Khalifa in Dubai is also taller. Okay, just a few more pictures again of this Abraj al-Bayit. Again, it's an enormous collection of buildings. Again, soaring height, the great clock tower here, and the entrance to this complex, 4 levels of very high-end shopping, and the entrance to the hotel. Again, the Fairmont Hotel Group runs this, the highest hotel in the world, and a view down from the tower upon the Great Mosque as you see it far below. Again, this is very, to many Muslims, actually I'm not Muslim, but I personally find this incredibly jarring, this sort of tremendous commercialization around this very, very sacred place. I also wanted to point out, you can already see it by the cranes, that the sacred mosque is about to be expanded even more. There currently is major construction here, and here we have a visualization of how the mosque will be expanded. This is, again, the running area. This is the mosque currently. It's going to have an enormous expansion, as indeed eventually there will be 3 million people coming here to Mecca rather than just 2. And finally, there's this. The world's biggest hotel is going to open in Mecca as well. This is from The Guardian of London. The holy city is fast becoming a Las Vegas for pilgrims, thanks to this new multi-billion-dollar mega hotel with 4 helipads and 5 floors for Saudi royalty. 10,000 bedrooms, the world's largest hotel. It will be an entire city of 5-star luxury, catering to the increasingly high expectations of Wild Hill pilgrims from the Gulf. modeled on a traditional desert fortress, seemingly filtered through the eyes of a Disneyland Imagineer with classical pretensions. This steroid scheme comprises 12 towers, teetering on a top of 10-story podium, which houses a bus station, shopping mall, of course, food courts, conference center, and a lavishly appointed ballroom. Again, this enormous building expected to be completed in 2017, the largest hotel in the world, and again, all in 5-star luxury. There were a number of people who tried to prevent all of these buildings from being constructed, including Irfan Al-Alawi, the director of the Islamic Heritage Research Foundation. He says, "The city is turning into Mecca-Hatton. Everything has been swept away to make way for the incessant march of luxury hotels, which are destroying the sanctity of this place." And here we have a view of Mecca, and you will see another classic symbol of progress and urbanization, smog. However, we now turn to another holy city which has determinedly resisted this kind of commercialization, the holy city of Muhammad, the holy city of Medina, after the break. Here is, you can see that Medina is even further inland. Again, it's all part of the sacred zone. We, as non-Muslims, would not be able to go there either. Actually, I did do some research recently. Currently, or at least when I was trying to, it's very difficult even to get to Saudi Arabia, let alone get to these sacred regions. This is the landscape. You may have noticed this already again a little bit, but this is the landscape for these Meccan regions, Mecca, Medina. It does remind a little bit of Nevada, doesn't it? So very, very bleak and very burned. And this is Medina. It's, as you can see, the second largest mosque in the world. This, again, we forget this because we think so much of the centrality of Mecca that we forget that when Muhammad moved to Yathrib, again, which becomes Medina, when Muhammad moved to Medina, he stayed there. It basically became the capital city. This means that he's actually buried here. He's buried in this mosque. Again, you see the multiple minarets, for example, and it's an enormous construct as well. For us, a little tidbit of information that is a little eerie. Because when this mosque was expanded, this was in the 1990s, it was done by the very large construction company of the bin Laden family. Osama bin Laden came from a very, very, very rich family. Very rich family. And again, one of their specialties was in constructing or expanding mosques. So again, the bin Laden family did this mosque right here. I love the polished floors. Again, it's marble. Also, what often strikes me is, okay, years ago, I went to Australia. Australia, exactly. I went to Canberra, which, as you know, is a new, well, it was then, a new city, just a capital city, sort of like Washington, D.C., the same idea. And there is a state library building in Canberra, Australia, which is made out of Carrara marble. And I thought, what? The marble that Michelangelo used? You're using it on a building? Seriously, I mean, that's really, really special stuff. The following year, I went to Italy, and I went to Carrara, and I need not have worried. There's a lot of it left. Some of it has wound up in Saudi Arabia, such as in these various mosques as well. Because, as you know, one of the things that makes marble so remarkable is it has its own internal temperature. No matter how hot it is, marble is cold to the touch. This is one of the reasons, by the way, since I'm on a tangent, I might as well just go with it. This is one of the reasons why Michelangelo believed, like many Renaissance artists, this is why Michelangelo believed that marble was alive, because it has its own internal temperature. Again, this mosque, even in non-Hajj times, is very, very full, again, from visitors coming from all over the world. This mosque in its interior can seat or accommodate 350,000 people. Again, it's really quite remarkable. And that brings us to the question of, well, how do we know where Mecca is? It's this right here. It's called a Qibla. The Qibla points you in the direction of Mecca. In other words, if you face the Qibla, you are facing towards Mecca. Again, this is the easiest way to know in which direction Mecca is. Again, this is the interior of the mosque, and again you can see this Qibla as well. It has a magnificent air conditioning system. You can see the ducts. And these are two of the doors where the first great prophets are buried. That is, Muhammad is behind one door, and then his successors are behind two more doors. Again, this is very, very magnificent. It's really, truly remarkable. Again, this is Medina. Medina, too, like many of these great mosques, have, of course, Muslim schools. That is, schools which teach the Quran and all of, again, all the tremendous commentary that goes with the Quran itself. This, again, is the great mosque at Medina. If you have any questions, please do feel free to email me. As I mentioned before, I really do like questions, and I will respond as quickly as possible. At least as soon as I check the emails, I will try to respond to you. So, today, for what is left of our half hour, are you exhausted yet? All the walking, all the people, the crams, the camel. How did you like the camel? All right, yummy, yummy. A little hint of rubber, right, exactly. Okay. So, all right, so today we're going to focus on another important player in the world of Muhammad, a young man by the name of Ali. In this is actually a very interesting picture from my point of view, because it's a picture of Ali. It is probably not a historically accurate picture of Ali, but since Muslims accept the Ten Commandments, you may recall that the second commandment says, "You will make no images." Again, many Orthodox Jews, devout Muslims, and devout Christians believed that this means you don't make any sculptures, and you don't paint anything, and you don't draw anything either. And so again, in certain Muslim traditions, there therefore are no artistic traditions in that sense. In other words, that the art in and of itself is just geometric patterns, the calligraphy, of course, of the Quran, and sort of geometric plant motifs. Okay. So the fact that there's a picture of Muhammad, I'm sorry, not of Muhammad, but of Ali, and that it's officially sanctioned, I find very interesting. But again, we'll talk about that again a little bit later on as well. So, in Muslim culture, again, Ali was famous for his courage, for his honesty, for his deep loyalty to Muhammad. He was famous for his knowledge of the recitations. He was famous for his knowledge of early Muslim law. And he is also central to the mystical traditions of the Sufi. Again, last semester, somebody asked me, "Are you going to talk about the Sufi?" Now I feel compelled to do so, but not today. Ali's father was the custodian of the Kaaba, again of the cube, at that time, in this great sacred holy city of Mecca. And Ali's father was also the sheikh of his clan, again part of the larger Quraysh tribe. And Ali's father was also an uncle of Muhammad. You may recall from a long, long time ago, 2 lectures ago, that Muhammad lost his parents at an early age, and then an uncle of his took him in. So this is the irony. It is Ali's father, before Ali was born, it was Ali's father who took Muhammad in and raised him for a time in his house. According to the traditions, Ali himself was born inside the Kaaba. His mother, again, who also tended this sacred shrine, gave birth to him in the Kaaba, and therefore he stayed there for 3 days with his mother. According to the traditions as well, the first person the little infant saw, besides mom, of course, was Muhammad. Muhammad, at this time about 30 years old, again a cousin as well. When little Ali was 5 or 6, a great famine hit the Arabian lands, and so we have a switch. Muhammad is now about 35. He's a very affluent, he's a very wealthy merchant. He and Khadija are very wealthy merchants. And so he takes Ali into his household to take a little pressure off that very large family. So notice the switch. Muhammad grows up with Ali's father. Ali's father is now dead, so Ali now grows up with Muhammad. When he was 10 years old, Muhammad received a revelation that, one more time. When Ali was 10 years old, Muhammad received his first revelation. And young Ali was the first young male to accept Muhammad's message, dedicating his life, therefore, to the cause of Islam. Now, this actually is very significant. He's 10 years old. Every Arab would immediately have understood the significance of this. He was too young to worship the idols. Do you see? And so he became known as the fair of face, for example, because his face had never bowed down to and touched the ground in front of an idol, which emphasizes his purity. So again, he accepts, he submits at the age of 10, never having been defiled by worshiping an idol. This is also why he has, for example, the epithet, again, God's favor upon his face, which again you will find on your timeline. One other very interesting sidelight is it appears in this Arabian world, in spite of its polytheism, there had always been a monotheistic element. Ali's grandfather, for example, was a monotheist, believing in only one God. In other words, again, there is this kind of strain that goes through. Actually, I believe virtually every human culture has a monotheistic strain moving through all those many different idols and gods. So again, the significance of this is that Muhammad is not creating something new. He's bringing back the old truth. Again, this is very, very important. It's a very important Muslim understanding as well. So for the first 3 years that the angel is speaking to Muhammad, Muhammad speaks privately to people. First, of course, to his family, and then to strangers and pilgrims who come to the city. But after 3 years, he was commanded by the angel to now spread the word in public, which of course is a much more dangerous thing. And so in one of these traditions, Muhammad therefore addresses a large crowd. He offers them the opportunity to ask questions, and he offers them the opportunity to join him in this great enterprise of spreading the true faith, the true knowledge of God. And only Ali stepped forward. Only Ali stepped forward. And Muhammad sees this, and Muhammad says to him, "You are my brother. You are my heir." In other words, you will inherit what I have. So Ali again, Muhammad, very close friends. In the year 622, again, when the attacks upon Muhammad begin to intensify, Muhammad eventually decides to leave. Again, he sent his followers off to the city that becomes Medina. And then Muhammad himself decides to leave. Ali is now 22 years old. And so Ali sleeps in Muhammad's bed, pretending to be Muhammad, so that Muhammad can slip away to safety under the cover of night, his enemies believing, they see the lump, that Muhammad is actually in bed. In other words, again, Ali, a very, very courageous young man, he ultimately, of course, goes to Medina as well. And shortly after he comes to, again, this new Muslim, this new submission center, Medina, Muhammad tells him, "I have had a revelation from the angel Gabriel to give my daughter Fatima to you in marriage." And so indeed, Ali marries Fatima. Fatima, Actually, let me just do something here different. Oh, yes. Muhammad says, I have married you to the dearest of my family. Fatima was the youngest daughter of Muhammad and Khadija. She is greatly venerated by Muslims today, and it is so easy to know because it is one of the most popular women's names in the Muslim countries. Fatima was also unusual. Again, you do get this sense, you really get the sense that, yes, it's a family-based society, but Muhammad's family seemed to be particularly warm and particularly loving. For example, not only in bringing Ali into his family, but when Khadija was born, it was traditional that a newborn is given to a wet nurse. But instead, Khadija keeps the little girl with her, and so again, she grows up in the early years with Muhammad and Khadija as well. Again, there's a very, very strong bond that develops between Fatima and her parents. When Khadija dies, Fatima could not be consoled. She was so stricken with grief that she could not even eat. And then Muhammad, her father, told her, I've had a revelation from the angel. God has built a palace for your mother in heaven. And with that, Fatima was able to overcome her grief. After her marriage to Ali, here we go. Again, after her marriage to Ali, Fatima, again, they're residing in Medina. They are not very wealthy. And so Fatima initially does all the household work herself. Now, logically, you would say, well, of course she does the work herself. Well, no, actually, not of course. Even very modest families would have slaves, servants, maids. But she does all the work herself. It was said that her shoulders were swollen from carrying the heavy pitchers of water from the wells, that her hands were covered with blisters from grinding the corn in the hand mill. She made her own bread. Again, she carried the household. According to these Muslim sources, Ali and Fatima were very, very closely, were very, very devoted to each other, that it was a harmonious and divinely inspired, a harmonious and divinely inspired marriage. I'm saying all of this because it will have relevance. Okay. So meanwhile, Ali devotes himself to Muhammad's work. Muhammad teaches in Medina for 10 years, and Ali serves Muhammad very, very zealously. Ali led warriors into battle. Ali took part in the raids upon the caravans going to and from Mecca. And Ali fought in almost all of the major battles that Muhammad and his opponents fought. For example, one of the key battles was the Battle of Badr. This was the first major struggle between Muhammad and his opponents in Mecca. This again is the one in which Muhammad is outnumbered 3-1 and yet nevertheless wins an overwhelming victory. This battle, by the way, gave the Muslims the conviction that maybe they really could win against their opponents. Again, Ali took part in this. Ali took part in another major battle, the Battle of Uhud, which went a totally different direction. Initially, once again, Muhammad's much smaller forces had the advantage, were winning, and then his archers, seeing all the plunder that the opponents had left behind, run over and start taking stuff, opening a gap in the lines, and tremendous bloodshed as the Meccan forces then attack. Muhammad himself is severely wounded. He is then protected by Ali, who himself is wounded as well. And so, once the battle is over, who tends these two wounded men? Fatima, of course, who also visits the graves of the dead and prays for them. Finally, a year and a half later, these Meccan forces, allied with a Jewish tribe, try to attack the city of Medina itself. 10,000 men, 600 camels and horses. But the natural defenses of Medina and a large trench which had been dug meant that the cavalry, that is the camels, were useless. And so the Meccan and Jewish forces laid siege to the city. The siege lasted for 27 days, and then the Meccan forces began to fall apart. Muhammad attacked, drove away all of these forces, but he caught the Jewish tribe, killed all the men, and sold the women and the children into slavery. Ali also led raids upon enemy lands, and Muhammad said of Ali, "There is no brave youth except Ali. There is no sword which renders service like Ali's sword." And so Muhammad began to call Ali the Lion of God. Muhammad, and again, there's a reason why I'm going through all of this, so just bear with me. Muhammad also asked Ali to be one of his scribes, which means that Ali began to write down the recitations, again, the verses that were being repeated again and again and again. And finally, in the year 630 AD, when Mecca itself is captured, Muhammad asks Ali to guarantee that taking the city remain bloodless. And Ali did take the city without shedding blood. You recall that once Muhammad is in control of the city of Mecca, all of the 360 idols are destroyed. In some of the traditions, it is Ali who destroys them. Ali, of course, is younger, Muhammad is older, so Ali smashes each idol one by one, and with every idol smashed, Muhammad, standing at his side, calls out, "Truth has come, and falsehood has been vanquished." But Muhammad, you see, you have to keep in mind, you remember the three goddesses, right? From last week, the three goddesses. Yes, they had idols in Mecca, of course, but they also had primary shrines. And so now Muhammad goes to wipe out these shrines. So for example, Ali leads a force of warriors to take out this shrine. Again, it's out in the desert, and he destroys this shrine, demolishes the cult statue, carries away her treasures, and brings them back to Muhammad. That's number one. One down, two to go. Next, he launches an expedition. Muhammad launches an expedition against Al-Lat, which, again, if you remember from last week, means the goddess. This time, it is centered in a city, and the name of the city is Taif. And so initially, Muhammad and his forces and Ali lay siege to the city. Eventually, the city surrenders, and Muhammad demands that this cult statue be destroyed. The city responds by saying, "Well, how about if we destroy it in 3 years?" And Muhammad says, "Nope. 2 years? Nope. 1 year? Nope. 6 months? Nope." Damn. Okay. So finally, they said, "Well, can we at least not say our daily prayers and have someone else destroy it?" And Muhammad said, "Nope. You have to say your daily prayers, but yes, you can have someone else destroy it." And so he had several of his warriors destroy the cult statue, and it was surrounded by women screaming and crying as this cult statue was destroyed. The jewelry was taken from the temple and was used to settle a debt. But the strangest story, has it gotten strange yet? It's going to get strange. The strangest story is the destruction of this goddess. He sends, this is Muhammad, he sends not Ali, but a man who ultimately becomes a great general, a phenomenal general for the Muslims. And so he sends this general, a man by the name of Khalid, and he says, "Go to this valley, you will find 3 trees and the shrine of this goddess amongst these trees. Cut down a tree, come back and tell me what you see." So Khalid cuts down a tree, comes back, and the Prophet, Muhammad, asks him, "Have you seen anything there?" And Khalid replied, "No." So Muhammad said, "Go and cut another tree." So he rides out again, cuts a second tree, rides back. Muhammad asks him, "Did you see anything?" And Khalid says, "No." He says, "Go back and cut the 3rd tree." But when he comes back for the third tree, he finds a woman, dark, wild hair, shrieking, gnashing her teeth. Khalid takes a sword and decapitates her. And then the body dissolves into ash and blows away. He cuts down the last tree. The man in charge of the temple is also killed. And that's the end of this cult, because Muhammad says, the woman you saw was Al-Uzza. Okay, was that strange? Okay, thank you. All right, very good. Okay. Ali is then sent to the area known as Yemen to, again, spread the faith. He's there for about a year. And then when Muhammad goes on his, what turns out to be his last pilgrimage to Mecca in 632, again, shortly before his death, on returning towards Medina, again from this pilgrimage, they stop at a oasis, and Muhammad gathers all the pilgrims together that have accompanied him on this pilgrimage. He gathers all these pilgrims together, and he says, "Am I closer to you than you are yourselves?" And they all cry, "Yes, O Prophet, yes." And then he takes Ali by the hand and he says, "Ali is closer to you than I." Now, the reason why I mention all of this is because this leads to the belief that Muhammad has named an heir, and the heir is Ali. You recall last week I told you, I can guarantee you that you will know the difference between the Shia and the Sunni. Well, here it comes. All right. With the death of Muhammad, there is a succession crisis because Muhammad has not clearly indicated who is going to be his successor. Indeed, nobody expected Muhammad to die. Maybe Muhammad himself didn't expect to die, also a definite possibility. And it creates tremendous confusion amongst his followers. One of the great followers of Muhammad, a man by the name of Umar, says, "Muhammad is not dead. Muhammad has gone away for 40 days and he will be back." But Abu Bakr, the close friend and advisor of Muhammad, says, "Listen, for those of you who worship Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. For those of you who worship God, God is alive." And this stemmed the panic for a while. But the question now was, what do we do about a successor? What do we do about a successor? In Arabic, the name for successor is caliph. So who is going to be the caliph? Well, there are two, the first thing that happens is that as soon as Muhammad dies, all these alliances and all this unity which he has created begins to fragment immediately. For example, in Medina, you remember, he went to Medina to bring two hostile tribes in the city together, which he accomplished. But as soon as he dies, this hostility breaks out anew. In other parts of this Arabian world, too, already more and more tribes are very restless. You know, they say, for example, we were loyal to Muhammad. Now we'll choose another leader. Notice what this means. Their submission was probably less to Allah and more to Muhammad, which means that once again, the religion of the ruler is the religion of the people. The religion of the ruler is the religion of the people. So there are two basic possibilities, two basic options. On the one hand, there are the family members of Muhammad who say, in typical tradition, it should be another family member who should take Muhammad's place. And the logical choice is Ali. Why? For all of the reasons I've given. The little boy who stands up for Muhammad, the young man who takes his place to protect him, the young man who goes out and fights his fights and fights his battles and takes care of him and protects him again and again. And then Muhammad takes his hand and he says to the followers, he is closer than I am to you. It makes perfect sense. Even though Muhammad didn't specifically say it, it's logical. Ali would be the choice. But no. There's a lot of other Muslims who say, no, it should be the wisest. It should be the most faithful. It should be the most saintly. And 3 names immediately come up. The 3 closest advisors to Muhammad, all of which themselves would like to be the caliph. They would like to be the successor. Okay, this is awkward. So, here we have them. A kinsman, a family member should succeed. They are called the Shi'at Ali, the partisans, the supporters of Ali. So the Shia want Ali to be the new successor. The supporters of the advisors of Muhammad are the Sunni, because all Muslims are brothers. And so it should be the most faithful and it should be the oldest, which is Abu Bakr. Again, a very, very close friend of Muhammad. And so here we have these 2 divisions. The 2 divisions between the Shia and the Sunni starts with who is going to be the successor to Muhammad. Now, the Muslim community fractures even more quickly because with the death of Muhammad, all these tensions that had somehow been bridged begin to come to the fore. For example, the Muslims moved to Medina. Was there any resentment in Medina about this huge immigration? Well, now it comes to the fore because the people of Medina, let's see, do I have them? Yes. The residents of Medina, called the Ansari, now say, it shouldn't be one of the immigrants who is the leader. In other words, we'd like to have a hometown boy be the leader of our community. And so they begin to assemble. They begin to assemble to select a new leader. Umar, Abu Bakr hear about this. They rush to the meeting place to not break it up, but to guide it, and ultimately to emphasize that it should be Abu Bakr, who is, again, the oldest, and that he therefore should be the new caliph. He should be the new caliph. Okay, again, family versus faithful. All right. Now, the trick is, what about Ali? They have not consulted Ali. They have made a decision, Abu Bakr is going to be it. They've been able to rally support for Abu Bakr, but they have not asked Ali. And where is Ali? Ali and Fatima and the children are taking care of the body of Muhammad. They're cleaning it and preparing it for burial. And when one of the companions of Muhammad then comes to the home of Fatima and Ali and says, Fatima, Ali, we have a new leader. We have a new caliph. It's Abu Bakr. And Ali says, wait. How did this happen? And the man says, I'm sorry. If we had known you were interested. And Ali says, we can't even bury Muhammad before we start arguing about succession. And so Ali is clearly not excited about the idea that someone else has come to the position of caliph. Now notice the 2 positions. All right. So, is it important for Ali to support the new caliph? Yes, it is. So Umar, second in command, comes to the home of Fatima and Ali. In the Sunni version of this story, Umar comes to the home of Fatima and Ali, and he says to Fatima, I love you more than my children. You are more dear to me than my children. And you need to support Abu Bakr. And so Fatima turns to Abu Bakr. Fatima turns to her husband Ali and she says, you have to support him. It's necessary. In the Shia version of the story, it's slightly different. Umar comes with armed men to the house of Ali and Fatima. They demand to be let in, and they demand to know if Ali is going to support or not. Fatima refuses to open the door. Umar says, we will burn down your house with you in it. Then a number of the armed men smash up against the door. They break open the door, and as the door careens open, it hits Fatima and lodges her between the door and the wall, with the result that her ribs are crushed and she miscarries. Within 6 months, she is dead. This is the Shia story. You already see where this is going, don't you? Don't you? You can already see where this is going. Thursday. See you then.